We carried out research on the relationship between world prices and African food prices. And in particular, we were interested in two questions. One is, how much did African prices increase during the world food crisis of 2007-8, when global prices increased by a factor of 2 to 3? And the second question is, over a longer period of time, say 5 to 10 years, is there a statistical relationship, an effect of world markets on African food prices? And to answer the first question, we looked at 83 prices in Africa, different locations, different commodities, I think 12 different countries. And we found that African food prices increased about 63% on average during that, between June of 2007 and June of 2008. And this is somewhat less than the percentage increase in world market prices, but still quite a significant increase. But there was a lot of variation across countries and across commodities, much larger increases in Ethiopia and Malawi, smaller increases in South Africa and Ghana and Cameroon. In the second part of the analysis, we looked at the longer-term relationship between world food prices and African food prices using the error correction model. And here we were looking at a smaller sample, just 63 African prices, and comparing it to the price changes in world markets for the same commodities. And we found that only 13 out of the 62 prices showed a statistically significant relationship. It was about half of the rice prices did, and only 10% of the maize prices. The reason for this is probably that rice is often imported by African countries, and so there's a closer link to international markets, whereas most countries in Sub-Saharan Africa are fairly close to self-sufficient in maize, so there's not as much of a link between domestic and international markets. But there's also sort of a contradiction here. We see during the food crisis, African prices rose significantly along with international prices, but over the longer term, we don't see much of a link between the two. So that raises the question of what's the reason for this discrepancy? And one factor is that the price increase during 2007-8 was much larger. And so it may be that large price changes in the international market are transmitted, are passed on to African markets, but smaller price changes aren't, or aren't measurable. The second factor is that during the global food crisis, oil prices also increased sharply. And this increased the cost of transportation and fertilizer, and that could have exacerbated the price increases in Africa. In addition, there were local events. Many African countries closed their borders, prevented food exports, which would have increased the prices of grains in neighboring countries, landlocked countries. In addition, there were specific events in some countries which increased food prices. There was post-election violence in Kenya. In Ethiopia, there was a shortage of foreign currency, which prevented traders from being able to import. And in Malawi, there was a government procurement program that may have purchased more maize than they should have, and thus increasing the price locally. So in general, I think we can say that there isn't a very strong relationship between African prices and the world market, but when the world market price increases sharply, or there are other factors involved, then the connection becomes stronger, and that it's stronger for wheat and rice than it is for maize, because maize is, most countries are more or less self-sufficient in maize.